Let me show you. So what I showed you here was, there's a perception. You have a perception of what's aligned and what's not. And an example I'm going to give you, you don't go, yeah, you can just cut some of those things out. There's some things you can't, your family, demands, your bills you have to pay. There's certain obligations that you have to do, but there are definitely some that you can do that aren't serving you. And I think Facebook is probably the best example. How can you choose watching negative news, just all that kind of stuff. But so let's look at the external demands in this way, first of all. Let's say that you do see something like, I'm going to give you an example of when I wanted to change my career. I was doing business process improvement in corporate education, in big companies, Dells and Motorola's and those kind of companies. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I mean, the truth is that really felt for me going, against my, is this working? Yeah, against me. What I wanted to do was do things with the environment. I had recommitted to that, and I really wanted to do things with the environment. But it felt like this first thing here. It felt like it was pulling me in different directions. I mean, it's like I've invested all this time in this business process improvement stuff, and now I want to go do something with the environment. That's crazy. How can I do that? And that was a real internal conflict for me, because I perceived them as opposites. At some point, we quite often perceive things that are opposites that aren't. If you look at them differently. So when I really looked at business process improvement and decided, like literally went, how can I see this as not being in opposition? And what I saw was I had been working on energy efficiency in companies, in organizations, about reducing waste, improving efficiencies. I was talking now about Go Green Squads was about reducing waste, improving efficiencies. There was definitely a sensible kind of, it was a progression, and I hadn't seen it for a long time. I really struggled with that. I really was stressed about that, and that's where I did decide to go ahead and stop doing the corporate education and commit to doing Go Green Squads with Robert. And it really, one thing that made I almost had to make that distinction to be able to do that. Okay, so that's one example of perception that it's not really in opposition. We think it is, but it's really not. So here's another one, I think. Okay. This one to me is interesting because how, like politically there's the left and the right, and they're going like this right now, but I mean, really they're supposed to be heading left and heading right. And we see them in opposition. The other one for me really is about environmental groups. Where we see things in opposition that maybe they are, but if we look at it a little differently, it's really that that we need to come to some agreement in the middle, and that because sometimes you have to, like if you got a company that you're, or our household, we want to, when we, like I told you before about when we look for houses, there's some things you have to agree on. You can't separate them. But there's some things one person wants and some things that somebody else wants. So how can you find the middle? And again, you can come to, they're not so opposite. What are the things that are opposite? Well, is there a way we can get to them? So that's another one. And I think politics is so much like that. And the other one is when, like, environmental is a great example to me about opposition that we're seeing that doesn't have to be there necessarily. When you think about environmentalists, and alternative energy, and you think about traditional energy, people think of those as going, in two different directions, but we really need to look at them in alignment. The same thing is true on an individual level. If you say, like right now, I'm looking at, I'm doing some developing this center that is really, and really this material here, I saw doing this material in opposition to any other job. It stopped me from doing this stuff. And I really wanted to do this stuff. But what I had to realize is I can do this and I can do this, and they can be in parallel. I just can't do them at the same time, but they can be in alignment. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So if you say, if you can think of, we're gonna cover this a lot more in later weeks, but just think about, as you're looking kind of at the landscape of your own external demands, think about which ones are really you're seeing in opposition that aren't. Okay. So sometimes there's just demands that don't line up. There's nothing you can do about it. You got to deal with them, and so that's where I think this way, believe it or not, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I literally think this way, and this is what I'm going to suggest to you, is a way to think, and the key things are the questions. Because if you have something, an external demand, and say the goals that you set, are you still committed to it? You're going to go through that where you go, oh, geez, I don't want to do this anymore. Sometimes you can disconnect in the moment, and sometimes you need to disconnect completely. So here's one where, are you still committed to something, like right now, what's happened today is I'm working on my son's graduation party. They're going to have a sleep-in graduation party thing, which is fine. But this Friday, we found out that the money that the PTA is going to give us is half as much as they said. And the graduation's coming pretty quick now. They just told us this. Well, great. So I can tell you that I can look and, oh, I don't have to do this. I quit. You can definitely do that. And that's what I just said, is you can definitely do that. But if you're still committed to it, then, it's like, how do I handle it now? Do I have to handle it now? Do I have to handle it right now? Well, I can't deal with, I need to do some things when we get off this call about that graduation. And so what I needed to do was write down, the things I need to do, and, to generate something. And is there a deadline? Yeah, there is. So I had to put it on my calendar. And if there's not, well, just kind of make sure you interact with it. But do you see how the logic of this works? Mm-hmm. Because there's going to be things that, you can disconnect from your goals. I do all the time. I disconnect from my goals all the time. And that's part of the thing about times of no stress. And then you can go back and commit to them again. So things that don't make sense, yeah, you disconnect from them. Things that you just don't want to deal with now, that's fine, but make a note. Again, the thing about mass, so you don't forget it. Put it on a calendar, whatever. And then the key thing is taking action. Okay? So I need to make this flyer when I get off the phone. Any comments, questions? Give me a lot of stuff first.
It's good.
Okay. So the other thing, and I mean, it was interesting for me to put this on paper, because I realized I literally go through these steps when I'm deciding something, because I've looked at stress in such detail. And so, this next one is the same kind of thing. It's like, how do I make, for the external demands, how do I make decisions when it's like they're all kind of, in my mind? Like some of you said earlier, I'm dealing with this, 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 and this. And this may seem trivial, but it's not. Again, I look at it this way as I go, well, how, we were definitely going through it. I know you've gone through it too, with health or financial crisis. That's what you got to deal with. That's the priority. There's nothing that's more important than that when that happens. So that's urgent, and it's a big deal. So when there's something like bills due, obviously you got to deal with them right away. Something that's got a time frame, then you got to deal with that. And there's other things then that come next, which are important but not urgent right now. And then there's the little stuff. So there is a kind of a hierarchy to when we prioritize something. And again, looking at this, so let's say that these are big things. There's oh, actually, where's that? I missed one. Oops. Okay, never mind. I guess I deleted this by accident. Oh no, I know what it was. The thing here. I took it out because I didn't need another one. When I say urgency and big deal, urgency, that's pretty obvious. It's like, this needs to happen this week, this needs to happen next week, or it can be this hour, next hour, but that's pretty obvious. The size one is, to me, it's always identify the biggest one and then identify the next smaller ones, because everything's relative. Back to back to Einstein. Everything's relative. So that's all I was going to say about that. Sorry. So now we're dealing with the big ones. You know, if we're dealing with the big ones, some of them is dealing with the in the moment. But if there's a bigger task and you know you can break it down into chunks, do I have to complete it all now? No. This is another thing. Remember what I said about the forces have magnitude and direction? You know, if my husband is you know, and I go running sometimes, and you know, he runs marathons and I don't. But I mean, I like to run. But sometimes I would stress myself out while running because it's like I have to run that far, and he would say, just run to that next tree. You know, like going up hills is really what I'm talking about, is going up hills. Just go to that next tree. And I'd go to that next tree. And then he'd say, okay, now just go to that next street corner. You know, and so when he did that, it was like, oh, I can handle that. And so if you feel overwhelmed, again, we're looking at how do we reduce the stress from external demands. If it seems like your goal is so big, then it's really important to say, what's just the next thing? And so an example of this is we're saying we want to achieve some things in 8 weeks. And it may be like, oh my gosh, that's, you know, I just signed up to do way too much, and or, you know, I just want to disconnect from it. Well, we don't want to disconnect from it. That's the point. We want to achieve things. So what's the portion you can complete? So I'm going to ask you this week to say what portions, and I was waiting for other people before I did this, but so let me right now have you say, what are some of the goals that you set for, you know, for the 8 weeks? And then secondarily, I'm going to ask you what you can say for just this 1 week. So first of all, what goals did you set for the 8 weeks? And so for me, it's to get this center, actually get this center committed and funded and being able to do it. It's really all around the SAFE Center, which is for doing all of the, this is called convergence research, they call it right now. Okay, great. To have 4 paying coaching clients. That's a specific goal. The real obvious when you've achieved it. Probably puts some pressure on you, doesn't it? Because it's a new thing and it's, you know, yeah. Yep. How do you do that? Come on, guys, fess up.
Hang on.
My biggest one is financial peace. So you probably all know that about me. I have an amount I want to be making per month by the end of this time. Wow, 20 pounds in 8 weeks. That's cool.
I'm trying. It's very trying, actually.
Okay, so you're going to do something with your office, and you'll know it when it's done, because that's is something that you can. Because the thing with goals is you got to be able to, it's measurable, that you know when it's done. Get a job, complete publishing the book. Yeah, it's wonderful. So yeah, so there's some pretty aggressive goals there, which is good because they're inspiring to you, right?